I used to believe that if you kept your lawn trimmed, paid your dues on time, and minded your own business, life in a quiet suburban neighborhood would be peaceful. I was wrong. My name is Daniel Harper, and until 2 years ago, I lived in a tidy little subdivision called Maple Ridge Estates. It was the kind of place with identical mailboxes, perfectly edged sidewalks, and a homeowners association that proudly advertised itself as dedicated to maintaining community excellence. What they really meant was control.
But I didn't know that yet.
I bought my home after 15 years of hard work. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. 3 bedrooms, a modest backyard, and a 2-car garage I planned to turn into a workshop. I'd served 8 years in the Army Corps of Engineers and later started a small contracting business specializing in home renovations. Ironically, I was the kind of homeowner an HOA should love. I fixed things. I upgraded things. I took pride in my property. The first few months were quiet. I paid my HOA dues without thinking much about them. The letters they sent were mostly reminders about trash bin placement or seasonal flower guidelines. Annoying but harmless. Then came the first violation. It arrived in a crisp white envelope with bold red letters, Notice of Noncompliance. Apparently, my driveway had oil staining inconsistent with community aesthetic standards. I laughed when I read it. I'd just finished restoring an old pickup truck in my garage. A little oil had dripped onto the concrete. I'd already scheduled a power wash for the weekend. Still, I called the HOA office to let them know it would be handled. A woman named Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, answered. Yes, Mr. Harper, she said in a tone that suggested she'd been waiting for my call. We expect remediation within 5 business days. It'll be done Saturday, I replied. No problem. That's acceptable, she said. Failure to comply may result in fines. I remember thinking how unnecessarily stern she sounded. That was the first red flag. Within 6 months, the violation letters multiplied. My mailbox was slightly misaligned. My grass was 1 inch above recommended height. My American flag was not of HOA-approved dimensions. That last one made my blood boil. I'd flown that flag since the day I moved in. It had hung outside my tent in Afghanistan. It had meaning. I called Karen again. You can't dictate the size of an American flag, I said. We absolutely can, she replied. The bylaws are very clear. Federal law protects the right to display the flag. She paused. We're not prohibiting it, Mr. Harper. We're regulating its presentation. Regulating its presentation. The phrase stuck in my head. That's when I began reading the HOA bylaws, every page. I discovered something interesting. They had authority over common areas and certain exterior standards. But nowhere did it grant them the right to enter private property without consent, except in cases of emergency or structural hazard. That clause would matter later. I converted my garage into a woodworking shop. I wasn't running a business out of it. I just built custom furniture for fun.
Shelves.
Tables. Cabinets. One Saturday, I built a beautiful cedar pergola for my backyard. I submitted the required architectural modification request. It was denied. Reason: does not align with neighborhood aesthetic. I appealed. Denied again. I built it anyway. It was within property lines. It didn't violate city codes. It didn't block anyone's view. 3 days later, I received a $500 fine. Then $1,000. Then a lien warning. That's when I decided I wouldn't roll over. I consulted a property rights attorney named Michael Reyes. He reviewed my documents carefully. They're overreaching, he said. Common tactic. Most homeowners just pay the fines. What happens if I don't? They escalate.
Tretenia.
Sometimes foreclosure proceedings. But they must follow strict legal procedures. Can they come onto my property? Only under very specific circumstances, he said firmly. And never to destroy or confiscate. I nodded. I didn't know how prophetic that statement would be. It happened on a Wednesday, while I was out meeting a client. I came home around 3:30 p.m. At first, I thought I'd walked into the wrong house. My front door was open. Wood splinters littered the porch. The pergola, my handcrafted cedar structure, was gone.
Torn apart.
Broken beams scattered across the lawn.
My garage door hung crookedly, bent inward.
I ran inside. My workshop was wrecked. Tools overturned. Cabinets smashed. Lumber tossed into piles like trash. My workbench, built by my grandfather, was split down the middle. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I saw the paper taped to my kitchen counter. HOA Enforcement Action Notice. It claimed that due to persistent noncompliance and architectural violations, the HOA had exercised its right to remove unauthorized structures and modifications. No court order.
No sheriff.
No legal notice of entry. They had hired a private contractor. They had broken into my home. And they had destroyed my property. They picked the wrong homeowner. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I documented. I took photos of everything. Every broken board. Every smashed tool. The kicked-in door frame. The destroyed workbench. Then I walked to my neighbor's house. Did you see what happened? I asked. Mrs. Peterson looked pale. They came with trucks, she whispered. 4 men. Karen was here. She said they had authority. Did they show a warrant? I don't know. I checked my security cameras. They'd forgotten something. The system recorded to a hidden offsite server. I pulled up the footage. There she was, Karen Whitmore, standing in my driveway with crossed arms as contractors pried open my garage. At one point, she pointed toward my pergola and nodded. I felt something settle in my chest. Resolve. I called the police. When the officers arrived, I showed them the damage and the footage. This wasn't authorized by law enforcement, one officer asked.
No.
Did they have a court order?
No.
The officers exchanged glances. This appears to be criminal trespass and destruction of property, one said. They filed a report. I handed over copies of the footage. That evening, I called Michael. They did what? He said sharply. They broke in. Silence. Daniel, he said finally, do not speak to anyone from the HOA. I'm filing an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow. We sued. Trespass. Vandalism. Property destruction. Emotional distress. Civil conspiracy. And, because they'd attempted to enforce fines without lawful process, abuse of authority. The HOA's legal team responded aggressively. They claimed they had implied consent under community covenants. Michael demolished that argument in court. Implied consent does not permit forced entry, he said. This was not maintenance of common areas. This was a raid. The judge ordered a temporary restraining order against the HOA, preventing further action. Then the discovery process began. That's when everything unraveled. During discovery, we obtained internal HOA emails. Karen had been targeting me for months. One message read, "He thinks he's smarter than us."
We need to make an example.
Another, "If we don't assert control now, others will follow his lead." Assert control. Make an example. It wasn't about a pergola. It was the police investigation moved forward. The contractor admitted under questioning that he'd asked Karen if they had legal authorization. She said the HOA board approved it, he told detectives. We assumed it was legal. It wasn't. The district attorney filed charges against Karen and 2 board members for criminal trespass and destruction of property. The neighborhood buzzed. Some residents avoided eye contact. Others quietly approached me. We've had problems too, one man said. Finis. Threats. They'd been counting on Sile. The courtroom was packed. The prosecution played my security footage. Frame by frame, the jury watched as contractors smashed my pergola and forced open my garage. Karen sat stiffly, jaw clenched. Her defense argued that she believed she was acting within HOA authority. Belief doesn't override law. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for 4 hours.
Guilty.
On all counts. Karen was sentenced to probation, community service, and restitution. But that wasn't the end. 6 months later, the judge's ruling was devastating to the HOA. He found that the board had acted with reckless disregard for property rights and in bad faith. They were ordered to pay. The HOA's insurance refused to cover intentional misconduct.
Duas kiukata.
Residents were furious. I rebuilt my workshop. Stronger doors. Reinforced frames. Upgraded security. Neighbors began talking openly about reforming the HOA under transparent leadership. They asked me to run for president. I declined. I don't want power, I said. I want peace. But I helped rewrite the bylaws. Clear limits. Explicit prohibition of property entry without court order. Mandatory member voting for major enforcement actions. Accountability clauses. Maple Ridge estates changed. People ask me if it was worth it. The stress. The legal battle. The months of uncertainty. I tell them this. Property rights mean nothing if they're surrendered out of convenience. They thought I'd pay the fines. They thought I'd dismantle the pergola. They thought I'd be intimidated. Instead, they raided my home, and they picked the wrong homeowner. A year later, I received a letter. Not from an attorney. From Karen. It was brief. I allowed control to override judgment. I regret my actions. I didn't respond. Some apologies are for the sender, not the receiver.